Everyone tells you the safe move is a used Camry, Accord, Avalon, or Lexus ES. And honestly, most of the time, that advice makes sense. But here's the problem. When everybody shops the same cars, everybody pushes the prices up. Meanwhile, a whole corner of the used market gets ignored: big sedans, strange badges, quiet luxury, older premium cars with no hype left. Some are cheap because they are trouble, but some are cheap because the market simply stopped caring. The trick is knowing which ones are cheap because the market forgot them, and which ones are cheap because they're waiting to punish you. Let's start with the car that gets easier to understand the longer you stare at today's used car market. The Lincoln MKS was never the cool choice. It was not the car you bought to look like you had European taste. It was not trying to be a budget BMW. It was big, soft, quiet, American, and very much from that awkward Lincoln era where the brand was trying to look modern without scaring away the people who already liked Lincoln. And that awkwardness is why these things got so cheap, because today, who is specifically searching for a used MKS? Not many people. It does not have Lexus resale strength. It does not have the German badge. It is not an SUV. It does not photograph especially well in listings. And the interior can feel very late 2000s premium, which is another way of saying there are buttons, shiny trim, and tech that looked much more impressive when phones still had home buttons. But that is also why the car works. Because once you stop judging it like a status symbol, the MKS starts making sense as a cheap comfort machine. The version I would care about here is the 7-liter naturally aspirated V6. Not the EcoBoost model, not the version trying to convince you this large Lincoln is secretly a sports sedan. The 3.7 fits the personality better. It gives you enough power, a calmer ownership vibe, and it keeps the car closer to what it actually wants to be: a highway car, a space car, my back hurts and I do not want to drive a noisy, compact crossover car. You do not buy an MKS because it feels sharp. You buy it because comfort has depreciated harder than hype. That is the real appeal. You can end up with a large, quiet sedan for the price of something smaller, louder, and much less substantial. For the right buyer, that is not boring. That is the whole point. But you have to know yourself before buying one. If you want prestige, modern infotainment, sporty handling, great fuel economy, or something that makes people turn around in a parking lot, this is not your car. The MKS is not here to impress strangers. It is here to make a long drive feel less annoying. And because it is still an older premium sedan, the inspection matters. I would want records, a clean test drive, no strange transmission behavior, no mystery warning lights, and no suspension clunks pretending to be normal for the age. A cheap MKS can be a smart buy. A neglected cheap MKS is just a repair bill wearing leather seats. So the Lincoln is the big American answer, old school comfort at a discount. But what if you want the same basic idea with less chrome, less size, and a quieter kind of personality? That is where the Volvo starts to make sense. The Volvo S80 is for the buyer who does not want their car to announce the decision before they even step out of it. And honestly, when did quiet become a flaw? Because that is the strange thing about the S80. In the used market, it is almost too subtle for its own good. A used BMW still tells people something. A used Mercedes still tells people something. A Lexus ES has the reputation. Even an old Lincoln has a certain American luxury identity. But a Volvo S80? Most people scroll right past it. That is the opportunity. It is also the warning label. The 2-liter inline 6 is the one that fits this conversation best. It keeps the S80 away from the more complicated, more expensive, more enthusiast-flavored versions and lets the car be what it is: calm, mature, comfortable, and a little different without trying too hard. This is not a sedan for someone chasing drama. It is a sedan for someone who notices seats, someone who cares how a car feels after 2 hours on the highway, someone who likes a cabin that feels solid instead of flashy, someone who does not need a badge to explain the purchase to everybody else. That is the good part. The catch is that a cheap Volvo is still a cheap European premium car. And those are not the same thing as cheap economy cars. The purchase price might look friendly. The ownership experience depends on what the previous owner did or did not do. Parts, suspension wear, electronics, diagnostics, and ignored maintenance can all turn a tempting listing into a bad story. This is the kind of car where I would slow down before getting excited. Bring a basic OBD scanner. Check the car before you fall in love with the seats. Do not wave away warning lights because the seller says, "It's been like that forever." That sentence has probably ruined more used car budgets than rust. And while we are being practical, I like keeping a portable tire compressor in older, used sedans like this. Not because it makes the car better, but because these are comfort cars, and nothing ruins the whole calm, premium driving experience faster than discovering a slow leak when you are already late. The S80 buyer who wins is patient. They want comfort, safety, discretion, and something more interesting than the default used sedan. They have some maintenance budget. They care about service history. They understand that European does not automatically mean disaster, but it does mean you cannot shop like you are buying a Corolla. The buyer who loses is the one who buys it only because it is cheap. That is the S80 in one sentence. It rewards the person who knows what they are buying and punishes the person who only saw the price. The Volvo has the badge and the personality, but it hides both of them. The next car has the opposite problem. It gives you more than people expect, but the badge is the reason they hesitate. Quick favor, my friend. If this is helping you shop smarter, tap like and subscribe. And drop your city in the comments so we can keep these price breakdowns real for your market. This is probably the car on the list that makes people pause. A Kia? In a video about cheap premium sedans? Yes, but only if we frame it honestly. The Cadenza is not a traditional luxury car. It is not trying to be a Lexus LS or a Mercedes E-Class. It is more like Kia looked at the market and said, what if we gave people a bigger sedan, a nicer cabin, a strong V6, and a long features list, but did it without the luxury badge? That idea was not crazy. The problem was that American buyers did not know where to put it. If you wanted a Kia, you were probably shopping for value, warranty, or basic transportation. If you wanted a luxury sedan, you were probably looking at Lexus, Acura, BMW, Mercedes, or Lincoln. The Cadenza landed in the middle, too nice to be treated like a regular Kia, but not prestigious enough to be treated like a luxury nameplate. That is how cars disappear. Not because they are terrible, because nobody knows what shelf to put them on. And now, used, that confusion becomes the interesting part. Compared with the older cars here, the Cadenza can feel newer, easier to live with, and more familiar. The 3-liter V6 has enough power for the job. The cabin can surprise people who still think of Kia as cheap transportation, and the whole car has that slightly weird used car appeal where you keep asking, why is nobody looking at this? The answer is simple, because it says Kia on the back. That matters less if you are the one driving it, and more if you need the car to validate the purchase for other people. The Cadenza makes sense for someone who wants comfort, features, and a more modern-feeling sedan without paying extra for an established luxury badge. It is for someone who can separate the car from the badge and does not need the parking lot reaction. But I would not treat it like a basic economy car just because it is a Kia. It is still a larger, more complex sedan than most people remember. You want maintenance history. You want to check the VIN for recalls through official sources. You want to make sure the features work, the transmission feels right, and the car has not been treated like a disposable appliance. The wrong buyer is the person who wants traditional luxury status, all-wheel drive, sporty handling, strong resale value, or the feeling of owning one of the usual premium brands. The Cadenza is not that. It is the rational surprise. It is the sedan for someone who does not need the badge to do the talking because the badge is exactly why it got cheap. But if the Cadenza is the sensible oddball, the next one is something else entirely. This is the car you do not buy because it is the easiest choice. You buy it because everything else starts to feel a little too normal. The Saab 9-5 is the car I would be most careful recommending. It is also the car some people will remember most after the video ends. That is the contradiction. A good 9-5 does not feel like a normal used car decision. It feels like you step sideways out of the usual market. The seats, the turbocharged character, the unusual controls, the slightly stubborn Swedish weirdness, it all gives the car a personality that most cheap sedans just do not have. And that is exactly why people still care about them. But personality does not make ownership easy. Saab is an orphan brand. That changes the whole conversation. Parts can take more searching, not every mechanic wants to touch one, some shops will not understand the car. And if your entire used car strategy is, I want something cheap that any random place can fix without thinking, this is probably not the move. The 2.3 turbo is a huge part of the appeal. It is not just about power. It is about the way the car delivers it, the way it feels different from the usual V6 sedans, the way it reminds you that Saab did not build cars by simply copying everyone else's homework. But by now, condition matters more than the brochure. Service history matters, oil changes matter, cooling system health matters, turbo behavior matters, suspension condition matters, interior wear and electronics matter. You cannot just buy the cheapest one and assume the charm will cover the problems. It will not. The right buyer already understands the appeal, or at least wants to understand it. They are willing to research. They know where the right mechanic is. They accept that some parts may require patience. They do not panic just because the ownership experience is not as straightforward as a Camry. The wrong buyer is buying only because the price is low. That person should walk away. A good Saab 9-5 does not make sense for everyone, and that is almost the point. This is not the safest, easiest, most rational sedan here. It is the one you buy with your eyes open because you want something that still feels memorable after most used cars have faded into background noise. And that is the larger theme with all of these cars. They are not cheap because the market studied them carefully and made a perfect judgment. They are cheap because they are awkward, misunderstood, unfashionable, or stuck with badges that do not fit neatly into what used car shoppers think they want. That does not make every one of them a smart buy, but it does make them worth understanding. So here's the question I would ask. If you had to take one risk on a cheap premium sedan, would you go for the comfortable Lincoln, the quiet Volvo, the ignored Kia, or the weird Saab? Because each one is cheap for a different reason, and the reason matters more than the price. So no, these cars are not investments, and they are not risk-free shortcuts. But the used market does make mistakes. The Lincoln is the safe, comfort play. The Volvo is the mature pick. The Kia is the badge perception bargain. And the Saab is the emotional wild card. The Goldmine is not resale value. It is finding a car that still feels expensive after everyone else stopped looking.